Is artificial intelligence going to take away every single job, or is this an overblown fear? What mistakes can one avoid when launching their first startup? Is pursuing a PhD in the 21st century still worth it? These questions and more will be talked about in this episode of the Gen Z Diplomat Podcast with Raj Anand, and it starts right now.
So you left your PhD in AI to pursue business. What were the thoughts behind this, and would you recommend this kind of major step to Gen Z?
When you know you have the entrepreneurial bug, it's really hard to contain oneself. So the story goes like this. I did my engineering degree, bachelor's degree, and then I got into doing research, and I was actually on a PhD. Um, but at that point, I met somebody from the US who showed me MySpace, and I'm like,
Mm.
well, for people who don't know what MySpace is the social media of the older folks, basically, the Facebook of the
For
older
sure.
folks. So I was shown this tool, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So I just built that within the next 3 weeks. Worked, long hours, 18 hours per day, and build that. Because I knew that was going to be a massive transformation. And now I didn't have all the wealth. I couldn't fund a lot of my education. So I was like, okay, well, I have the opportunity to either do a PhD or, make some money, pursue my passions. And I just had to jump off that opportunity and start my sort of first business. And, you know, I wouldn't, I mean, I would love to finish my PhD at some point, but it's been 20 years now. But but equally, I would say that I think that was the right decision for me at that time. I really felt passionate about it, and I learned a lot from that. It didn't go to plan. I was naive and young and silly, but equally, I learned a lot from the experience, and I think I will
Okay.
never change that. So whether Gen Z follows my example or not, well, I'd say it was right time for me to do what I did.
If you do go back to finish your PhD, would it still be in artificial intelligence, or would you pick something else?
Most likely it would be in AI. I really enjoyed it
Mm.
actually. I was doing neural networks. I was actually building. The reason why I got into AI was because I love building video games because I love playing video
Oh
games.
yeah?
So
Yeah.
actually I was just kind of designing a smarter bot. You can navigate around puzzles and first person shooting games. So that's what I actually was building. And some of that stuff right now is actually being used to build the stuff today, like ChatGPT, for example.
For sure. And then, I mean, the kind of consensus around PhDs and I guess post-secondary education is kind of up in the air. I feel like people are hesitant. There's a lot of um, financial concerns around that, and then a lot of practical concerns because most people who get post-secondary degrees are either in a lifetime of debt or the degrees are useless relative to what they want to do. And so it begs the question, are PhDs and academia in general still worth it in the current century we live in? Is getting into the startup space young the best educational step in your opinion?
Well, I mean, we are in a very fortunate position today that we have courses from MIT available. The other day, I was doing a course in MIT from MIT. Was doing a like a just to brush up on my Python skills. I was just going through a course which is available on YouTube. And the phenomenal part of that is that we have all these opportunities in on YouTube or online, and it's fascinating that we can have all that today. But back in the day, we didn't have that opportunity. We didn't have the opportunity to like do these different courses, uh, you know, be virtually in the classroom, to see the worksheets, for example. Um, I mean, I think it's a very interesting time for us. And um, I think from my experience, I've learned more from doing things than reading about them. And so I'm a believer. If I go back in time, potentially I would. choose to learn on the job. Uh,
Mm.
Saying that, um, I also learned that sometimes structured learning is a better way of understanding things. This is why people still spend thousands of dollars on education in person as opposed to online, because the experience of co-learning is very powerful. Even today, I
Yeah.
spend a lot of money on co-learning. I'm a, I think, student for life. I was want to keep learning, and so I still spend a lot of time to go to places to learn from people in real life, because we're social beings. We love learning
Yes.
together. So I think I don't have a concrete answer for you, but what I'll say is that there are elements where I would like to learn in person, and the elements
Mm.
where I would not want to do that, maybe do it online. And I think, again, I feel fortunate that I actually did what I did, and actually I built a fairly strong base to build on for my businesses after that.
Sure. Just speaking of, I guess, artificial intelligence. So, what are your thoughts on the future of AI? Where is it going, and what would you like to see accomplished by the technology and with the technology?
I think we are in a very interesting crossroads. I mean, I don't know if you came across this very interesting 1 hour long video from the makers of the guys who did Social Dilemma on Netflix. They have this
Mm.
very interesting um, video on AI and the future of AI. I think the interesting part of this is that a lot of the AI researchers themselves are perplexed by how quickly AI is developing. So, for
Mm.
example, when you're training AI, when you're feeding the data to AI and correcting and doing human reinforcement to make the algorithm better, at what time it flips to understand what you're trying to teach it, it's really hard to predict that. So, for example, there's an example in that video where the person is talking about, you know, training AI to respond to questions and provide the answers in English, and trained and trained and trained. At some point, it could answer questions in Persian.
Mm.
And like, how the hell did that happen? And
Yeah.
then the reality is that at what point does the human mind and AI can learn stuff and implement it and be able to be so good that I can pass exams, for example, which are fairly hard exams. In fact, today AI can pretty much pass exams as quickly as you can make them as human beings. And so we have, AI is going so fast, we don't know exactly how far it has reached. So we need to be careful about the evolution. So the future of AI can be either amazing and very helpful, or it can be destructive. Today, we need to think about the impact of AI a bit closer, and really know the path it's going to take. And this is why you see a lot of petitions by people like Elon Musk saying, let's slow down the pace because it's going way too fast.
Is that the answer, though? Is being safe with artificial intelligence, um, is the only answer to that, only solution to being safe, regulation and stagnation? What are your thoughts around that?
I think it's not stagnation, but it's about, yeah. So regulation is super important, and I'll tell you why. Things
Mm.
which are powerful in nature, like for example, look at the things which really impact human beings, like say the financial system. That has real impact on people's livelihoods, and that's why you see around the world the financial sector is regulated. It helps to make sure it's done the proper way. If things had to grow really fast with AI, imagine the impact of like people, you'll have 99.9% people who will do, great positive things, but that 0.1%, maybe 1,000 people, the bad apples, as it were, start to work on negative things like, I don't know, like hacking and,
Yeah.
creating, I don't know, bombs, for example. I mean, you can just imagine the kind of stuff they can work on. That the impact of that is pretty devastating. It's people compare it to the nuclear bomb, for example, because nuclear energy, nuclear bomb, it's like one thing which can make a massive impact on people's lives. And so regulations is an interesting way so that people can come together and really um, focus on the future. And I think also when this is done by big players who understand the impact of it versus individuals, and you open it up to everybody, there's a different sort of uh, requirement to regulate this. When you have it open to everybody, as I mentioned, the bad apples can do different sort of things with it. But when you have it with more controlled organizations, that's a different kind of impact. So as we are making it open and available to a lot of people, I don't say we should stop the innovation on it, but we need to be careful of what we release out to the public.
Fundamentally, I agree. I agree with all of those things. But in my mind, regulation doesn't make sense just in the sense of who enforces it. Is it government? Are the corporations that are putting these models out supposed to regulate it? And then who says that, companies in China, for instance, are going to even listen to that call for regulation? And that's where it kind of is like, it's like a game theoretic advantage where if you do slow down, let's say in America or the United Kingdom or Canada, it's not to say that BRICS nations would slow down on their development of artificial intelligence. And I don't think they would kind of heed that warning call.
Well, if you look at history, typically when you look at sort of history and look at like the arms race, the space exploration, it tends to be tit for tat. It doesn't. There's hardly example of a case where there's only one nation keep growing without any impact on the other nation. I think this has to be a global mission. In the U.S., it has to be, for example, the U.S. tends to be the hub for innovation across the world, and obviously China is doing their own thing as well. But I don't think it's about uh, countries uh, sort of competing against this. It shouldn't be about that. It should be about building it together. And I don't think I do think that if in one side things become more regulated, the impact is going to be that that'll be mimicked in other countries as well.
So you would recommend and support a kind of like United Nations for AI.
I would probably say that there has to be some sort of a body which can allow us to have a general consensus on this. Yes, it does make a lot
Sure.
of sense to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. You're writing a book about artificial intelligence. Could you tell us what it's about and why you're writing it?
Yeah, so I'm actually writing this book really for companies and the companies um, management and employees to understand the impact of AI. And I'm trying to make it as so simple that anybody can pick up this book and understand what's going on. So I do a lot of comparison between the industrial revolution when machines came into our lives and today when AI is taking over a lot of the different areas. So it's more about education and sharing, making the concept simple to understand, and also such that it could be a book which could be used for thinking about the future as well. Because I think there is a lot of parallels, and there's also a lot of like um, panic as well about particularly about jobs, especially about the opportunities. And you know, at first when things hit us, we get a bit panicky about what's going on. But over time, we realize that these are all new opportunities to become better, improve our abilities, maybe earn more, be more efficient, be happier. So I think there's an opportunity here to be more efficient and happier.
Your company, Goodman Lantern, strongly believes in gender equality and also women's economic empowerment. What are your thoughts surrounding this philosophy, and how can other companies look to do the same?
Yeah. So as you can probably tell, I'm very pro um, I'm pro AI, but also I'm pro human. So I think there's actually a collaboration opportunity. Um, but going to the discussion about women and equality, so I went through a very challenging time in my life, and my wife had a very massive health issue. And as you went through it as a couple, it made me realize the importance of having a mission, which is beyond just making money. It's a mission
Mm.
to make a change, make a dent, and leave a legacy behind. And after my wife recovered and I had my daughter, made me realize that actually when I go back to being a child, when I did the sciences at school and then I went to engineering and then went to work, I realized that as I went through this journey, the number of women in sciences and engineering kept reducing. So from almost 50%, it went to 1 is to 50, and then pretty much there was no women at all in programming when I started to get into it. So, and I don't want this to happen to my daughter, who when she is ready to join the workforce, she is not, she doesn't have the same opportunity. So we made the mission of our company to fight for women's rights and to actually give them opportunity, especially in technology and marketing, to empower women. And it's a big part of our business. 80% plus team members in our company are women. And, it's great to talk about it, but actually to make a change with your own organization, put money where your mouth is even stronger message, I think.
For sure. And how can companies take like steps towards this, like towards this kind of pro-equality state?
I think it comes down to having like that mission, that those core values. Our core values is being inclusive. Our mission is to empower women to be entrepreneurial. So and that comes from the top. So everybody in the management has to think about it, um, contemplate how you can do that in the company and make it, a fundamental point of differentiation between your thinking and the next company's thinking. Um, Ours is something which we believe in. I don't think adopting a mission for the heck of it is really what it's all about. In my opinion, it's all about what you believe in, what's your passion. So, for example, for water aid, it was about making sure nobody was thirsty. Tom Shoes says, let's make sure every child has shoes to wear. Um, so everybody has a different mission. And I think it's about understanding what is our core belief and then finding a way to incorporate that into our companies.
Sure, sure. Well, that's right now. And I would like to take a step back in terms of how you began your career. So what was it like launching your first startup, and how did you get the confidence in order to take this pretty major step?
I mean, I think, my younger self had more confidence. I mean, I think being naive is actually a very strong opportunity because, you know,
Mm.
when we're naive and young, we tend to be bolder, tend to be bit risk averse, we or happy to take risk on actually. I think in many ways, the younger self, my younger self was very happy to take on. I had always had big dreams, and I always want to make sure that that's possible. And to do that, I was happy to embark on any journey, and do whatever I could do to kind of get there. And actually, that worked out fairly well. But it was really hard. So I
Yeah.
remember, like, in my early days, I didn't have enough cash to even, have a proper meal, for example. I was like, I had to really save. I did raise money, but that money I spent primarily on teams, and other stuff which you require to do to run a company. So it was a very hard, challenging grind, and I don't think I really understood what it takes to run a business. But it worked out really well because I learned so quickly. Um, all
Yeah.
I all I had to do was constantly learn, implement, learn, implement. I made a lot of mistakes. A lot of things went wrong. Also, a lot of things went right. Um, I think one thing I remember clearly was there was a time um, when we raised some money. The money never came into the company on time, and we were really struggling with the cash. And we had to like really believe in our vision and keep going. And that time I learned about the power of working with customers to be the investors as opposed to raising money. And that's expensive capital, in my opinion. So really working with customers to fulfill their their requirements and that being a source of income. That for me is great hygiene. Like I really believe in that today as well. So most of my companies now are bootstrapped. I actually work with customers to run the companies, and that's how I fund my companies. I think that for me is a lifelong lesson, which I could have never learned any other way. So while the first business didn't work out, we didn't IPO or we didn't sell the company. At some point, I had to fold the company, but the learnings from that has been something which I've cherished for the rest of my life.
Just for the Gen Z that are curious, what does it take to run a business?
I think the number one part is being the being determined. The determination to run a business, to really make a change, is super important. I think people underestimate the amount of effort it takes to run a company.
Mhm.
You know, especially in the earlier days, it's a lot of sleepless nights. It's a thankless job. You have demanding customers, demanding employees. You got suppliers you need to pay. It's really really hard. But when the person, the entrepreneur, is so focused to make a change, make a statement, they will go. They'll do anything they have to do to kind of achieve that goal. I think that focus, that determination, that sort of willpower to kind of go, having a shit day, um, and then going, getting some sleep and then waking up again, being in a positive mindset and saying, well, if it's a different day, I'm going to make a change. I'm going to make a real impact. I'll do it again. And that you just keep showing up again and again and again. And on the nth day, maybe the 10th day, the 100th day, the 300th day, things start to change. And people start to believe in the story, the narrative, which you, the person, have. And that's where that confidence comes into other people. The inculcation of confidence comes into the people, suppliers, customers, and teams. And that's when teams starts to happen.
So a kind of ruthless determination in order to succeed at what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just getting on with it, because that's the only way you
Yeah,
can actually make a change.
yeah. But, in my mind, I would only be ruthlessly determined for something that I believed in. It wouldn't just be like to make money, for instance, because you can make money trading stocks. There's no like ruthless determination in my book based off of that. And so, how would you recommend Gen Z or any person find that passion, that goal, that motivation to have this ruthless determination? Like, how did it come for you? Was it something that you always had, or something that you kind of noticed? And that's when you just narrowed in and focused on it.
I think, I mean, there's a lot of different books on this, a lot of different discussions about it. I think some people say, well, do what your passion is. My belief and my experience is that actually, most people don't know what they want to do, what they're passionate about. A lot of people don't understand what their passion is. And sometimes what they might be passionate about, maybe it won't help them build a business. Um, so what I started to believe or started to do is, or I started to do in the past was to start to get good at something which I enjoy doing. So um, early on in my life, I was really into video games, so I had to do computer sciences to build video games. But then over the sort of time, I started to get passionate about it. I started to enjoy um, technology and just like to see like tech and what's it progressing, and that became my passion. And today, I would do that. If you don't pay me any money, if I didn't pay myself at all, I'll still do that. For example, that's what I love doing. Technology is what makes me, you know, I'm a total sort of people call it total geek when it comes to like learning stuff, want to know what's going on. I spend 4 hours every day minimum to learn about new things, and so I spend a lot of time learning. It's a really important part, and I do a lot of learning about digital stuff. So for example, over the years, I found that like digital technology and marketing is what I really enjoy doing. And it's not something I don't think as a kid I was passionate about marketing or digital that much. But over the years, I started to really enjoy it. And so the first initial getting over the hump is really hard. Once you're over the hump and you start to enjoy something, um, then that becomes a passion. And then that's that you're thinking about it all the time. Like, for example, at the moment, I'm obsessed about AI. Like, I don't know how many hours I spend every day to like learn about different stuff. After doing all the research I've done, I still think there's so much more to learn about it. And is that passion to learn and implement is what I guess I live for. Is why I do what I do.
You said you spend around 4 hours a day learning, but
Yeah.
where are you learning? Is it just on YouTube? Are you reading articles? Do you have, certain sites? Because I think that's a valuable skill for Gen Z is not just learning, but learning how to learn. Because you can absorb lots of information. There's endless amounts of information, but knowing what the right information is and how to retain it and also how to use it is, that's what separates the successful people from the unsuccessful people. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So as I was telling you earlier, like there's this thing about structured learning and meeting
Yeah.
people to learn different things. And I think a big part of where I start to figure out what's the trend, where to find information is to meet people who inspire me to progress further. So, for example, I'm a part of this organization called EO, stands for Entrepreneurs Organization. It is a premium network of entrepreneurs, 17,500 members across the world. I'm the founding chapter board member and of a chapter at the EO, and there are about 100 chapters, or a little more than that, 61 countries or 200 countries across the world where EO exists. And I think a lot of EO members actually help me understand where the trends are, what's interesting, what podcasts to listen to, what videos to like follow, which books to read. Uh, so I spent a lot of time actually to figure out where to spend the time. So I've literally, for example, look at my Gmail. I kind of store like items which I need to like do. It's like my to-do list as well. And in that I will have like if I have say one customer email or team member emails, I probably have 5 emails thing that are like different courses I can follow, podcasts I can listen to, YouTube videos which are really interesting. So I'm just consuming data all the time. If I'm walking, I'm listening to a podcast. Yeah, I'm sitting down on a bus or a train. I've got my videos all downloaded already. If I'm sitting in the plane, I've got a book to read. I'm like constantly consuming information, and that's what keeps me interested and keeps me active. And I don't think I'm the exception. I think a lot of people who want to keep growing want to keep learning all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here. No, I'm in like a ruthless learner. I'm always, consuming books. I carry a book everywhere with me. Um, I was inspired by Stephen King because he says, whenever he's bored, he just, reads. Um, and yeah, most of the knowledge I've ever accumulated in psychology, philosophy, neuroscience, artificial intelligence, especially. It's been from books. It's been from, Lex Friedman and Andrew Huberman podcasts. Um, but just going back to what you were saying about the startup, you said a lot went right, but also a lot went wrong. So what were the biggest mistakes that maybe you made or that you see being made in the startup space that you could advise Gen Z to avoid?
Yeah, so I think the biggest mistake which I made as a younger adult was that I was not open to actually consuming and learning. I think I at some points had slack in my learning abilities, and uh, it was more about execution and less about learning. And that's something which I think if I could go back in time, I'd like to change that. Um, Number two was that I also was very um, at some point I was in the mindset that it's all about raising capital and using that to grow businesses. And actually, I realized that um, bootstrapping is a very good way to even run businesses as well. And has been as the way I've been doing businesses. I've sold a business in the past. I've grown a business from 7.5 million to 45 million. The back of just understanding how to sell and how to market. I think, and the third and most important thing I learned was that for any business to run, cash is king. Then when the cash is over, that's the end of the business basically. So focusing on the marketing, the selling, and constantly growing the company from the point of view of cash flow is super important. So that's something to keep in mind all the time. I'm ruthless about my cash flows even now, and I like to keep a close eye on that even as a business owner.
What advice would you give to the Gen Z that is hesitant to get in the startup space, but also eager to make a difference in the world? Would you advise them in actually going for it, or would you say, spend a year to learn, to work, get to know the industry that you want to break into, and then do that?
If I had the chance and opportunity to go back, I would say I would probably like to spend a year or 2 years working with somebody else to
Hmm.
get to learn the ropes a bit. I think it does help. Like there's a thing to be said about structured learning, and working for somebody else actually is a great way to learn. If you can get a great mentor in the form of a manager, that's the best case scenario because actually it
Yeah.
will teach a lot of different things which otherwise would take many years to learn. So I would recommend for Gen Z, just an experience share for me. I would like to go back in time in this to structured learning in a company and then implement that. I had that eventually working in the corporate world, but it was later on in my life. It wasn't in my first few years of working. It was more sort of after, say, 5, 6 years. And I think if I did that at the beginning of my career, that would have been much better.
Okay, cool. I mean, that answers a question for me as well, because I was also wondering that. Um, so I guess the last question for me, this is the Gen Z Diplomat Podcast. So most of the questions have been about Gen Z, but what advice do you have for Gen Z?
I think the biggest advice I have with Gen Z is like, I think it's about understanding what you want to do and achieve in your life. I think if you ask someone who is towards the end of their lives, and the biggest regret they have is that they haven't done something they really wanted to do. So
Hmm.
it's having if you're living in the moment and you have a roadmap, however confused it might be or ill-informed it might be, having a end goal actually is a great idea. I think um, living life with a end goal in mind, being present and purposeful life is actually a great fulfilled life. And it might just sound like words coming out of some old gray-haired person's mouth, but actually,
No.
it really is something which will it will. If I knew that as a younger person, would have made me more fulfilled much quicker. And I think
Yeah.
now that I think of this stuff, it makes me feel that I live this kind of lifestyle where I'm thinking about optimizing for happiness first, having a vision and a goal, just makes me feel like it's worth all the time and effort I put into it.
For sure. It's you have to find something that gets you up in the morning that will also help the world. That's kind of the sweet spot I've found. Well, Raj, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned a lot from you. Um, where can we find you on social media? And do you have a title for your book?
Not yet, not that
Not
book
yet?
yet,
Okay.
but you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I'm Raj Goodman Anand on LinkedIn and Raj Anand on Twitter. So yeah, connect with me, drop me a line. Love to hear from people. So yeah, please do get in touch.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Gen Z Diplomat Podcast. To support it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and leave us a follow on our Spotify page. I firmly believe that the more we talk about what future we want, the more likely we are to build a future that we deserve. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope to see you in the future episodes of the Gen Z Diplomat Podcast.